Carter Steele was elbow deep in the guts of a battered pink unicorn toy when the little girl standing in front of him burst into tears. "It won't light up anymore," she sniffled, clutching the unicorn's frizzy tail like it was a lifeline. Carter gave her a soft smile. "Well, princess, let's see what we can do about that, huh?" She couldn't have been older than 4, with giant hazel eyes and a sparkly backpack that was almost as big as she was. Her curly hair was tied into 2 fluffy pigtails, and her bottom lip trembled as she watched him fiddle with the toys, wiring her mother, who Carter hadn't noticed until she crouched beside her daughter, gave a tight smile. "Sorry to bother you. We were just walking by and she saw the sign." "No problem," Carter said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Toys are my specialty, kind of." Technically, he fixed anything he could get his hands on: phones, toasters, old washing machines. He'd even resoled sneakers once. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep him and his son afloat. Most weeks, at least. "I'm Carter," he said, glancing up at the woman. She was stunning. Not in the way TV stars were, but in the way that made you forget how to speak for a second. Tall, chestnut hair pulled back in a loose twist, crisp white blouse tucked into high-waisted jeans that looked expensive but not flashy, and her eyes sharp, intelligent but kind. "This is Penelope," she said, touching her daughter's shoulder. "And I'm Laurel." "Laurel Dean," Carter nodded, trying not to stare. "Nice to meet you both. Can you fix it?" Penelope asked again, hopeful this time. He grinned and clicked the final wire into place. The unicorn's horn lit up with a soft glow, followed by a tinny version of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Penelope gasped and threw her arms around the toy. "You did it, magic hands," Carter joked. Laurel smiled at that, eyes lingering on him a second longer than necessary. "You're good with kids." "I've got one of my own," he said. "Parker, he's 6, he's at school right now." Laurel straightened a little. "You run this place on your own." "Yeah," Carter said, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not much, but it's ours." She looked around the shop, cracked display cases, shelves stacked with old electronics, a faded sign that read "Steele Fix IT," and then back at him. "Well, it's something." "Thanks," he said, not sure if she was being polite or genuine. Before she could say anything else, Penelope tugged at her hand. "Mommy, can we give him something? He fixed Sparkle." "Oh, right." Laurel reached into her purse, but Carter held up a hand. "No charge," he said quickly. She looked like she needed that unicorn back. "That's enough payment," Laurel blinked. "Are you sure?" "Positive." She hesitated, then said softly, "That's very kind of you," he shrugged. "Just trying to do some good." Laurel studied him with a look Carter couldn't quite read, then she handed him a business card. "Well, if you ever need anything, give me a call." He took the card, read the name L. Dean Holdings, and nodded, not making much of it. "Probably a realtor or something." "Thanks again," she said, walking out with Penelope. Carter watched them go, then looked at the card again. It felt too thick to be a regular business card. Gold embossing. Clean, bold lettering. He flipped it over. CEO. He blinked. CEO? Of what? He looked out the window just in time to see a sleek black car pull up to the curb. A driver in a suit stepped out to open the door for Laurel and Penelope. His jaw dropped. She was a CEO. He glanced around his crumbling shop, then down at his grease-stained shirt. Well, hell, 2 days later she came back, this time without Penelope. "I hope you don't mind me dropping in," she said, stepping into the shop. Carter blinked. "Not at all." "Everything okay with Sparkle?" she smiled. "Yes, Sparkle's doing great. I just wanted to say thank you again." "You already did." "I know," she said, then added, "I've been thinking about you." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I've got a warehouse full of broken things. Office chairs, old espresso machines, even some outdated computers. They're just sitting there collecting dust. I thought maybe you'd be interested in fixing them up. I could pay you." Carter stared at her. "You want to hire me?" Her smile widened a little. "Well, I'm not offering a full-time job. More like a side project if you're up for it." He glanced around his shop. Business had been slow lately. Parker's school fees were due next month. "Yeah," he said, "I'm up for it." "Great," she said, then paused. "Want to come by tonight? I can show you what's there." Carter hesitated. "I've got Parker until 6. "Bring him," she said. "We'll order pizza." He blinked. "You sure?" "I like kids," she said. "And I think he'll get along with Penelope." So that night, Carter found himself holding Parker's hand as they stepped into a massive glass building downtown. "You work here?" he asked as Laurel greeted them in the lobby. "I own it," she said casually, pressing the elevator button. Carter's eyes widened. "You own the building?" Laurel just smiled. "Come on. I'll show you the rooftop." 10 minutes later, they were eating pepperoni pizza on a private rooftop patio, the city's skyline glittering around them. Parker and Penelope were chasing each other around a small patch of grass, while Carter leaned against the railing, watching them. "This is not what I expected," he said. Laurel sat beside him. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. A warehouse, maybe a dusty back room." "Not this," she laughed. "I like views." He looked at her. "I don't get it. You're a CEO, you've got everything." "Why are you helping me?" Laurel looked away, then back at him. "Because you helped my daughter, and because you didn't want anything in return. That's rare." Carter swallowed hard. "I'm not looking for a handout." "I know," she said. "That's why I trust you." He looked at her again, really looked this time, and something shifted, something real, something dangerous. He cleared his throat. "So, where's that busted espresso machine?" She smiled. "Downstairs." "But we've got time." And as the kids laughed and the city glowed around them, Carter realized something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Carter hadn't expected the second visit to turn into a third, or the third into something that started feeling like a routine. By the end of the following week, he and Parker were at Laurel's office again, this time sorting through a line of malfunctioning standing desks stored in a side room of the building. It wasn't glamorous work, but Carter liked the quiet productivity of it, and the way Laurel occasionally leaned on the doorframe just to watch him work. "Do you always fix things like that?" she asked, arms folded, watching him disassemble the base of a desk with a screwdriver. "Only the ones that put up a fight," he replied without looking up. Laurel stepped into the room and crouched beside him, watching his hands with interest. "My maintenance crew couldn't figure out what was wrong with these. They said they'd need replacing. They probably never bothered to open the control module. It's just a stuck gear." He held up the small plastic piece, then dropped it into a tray of parts. "You could have charged me triple and I wouldn't have known the difference," she said, tilting her head. "Maybe," Carter replied, setting the panel back in place, "but that's not how I do things." Laurel didn't say anything right away. Then, in a quieter voice, she said, "I like that about you." He glanced at her, uncertain how to respond. Compliments from her always caught him off balance, like she saw something in him he hadn't noticed in himself for a long time. "You ever think about doing more with this?" she asked, gesturing to the half-repaired desk. "Expanding, hiring help," Carter shook his head. "I'm barely staying ahead as it is. I've got Parker to think about. Taking risks isn't exactly a luxury I can afford." Her expression shifted, not quite pity, but something close to concern. "What if you would help? I don't have investors lining up outside my door," he said, tightening the last screw. Laurel reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She handed it to him. He opened it slowly. It was a proposal, short, direct, and written in her sharp, elegant handwriting. A modest investment enough to buy tools, expand his workspace, and cover a few months of overhead. No strings attached. Carter stared at it, the words swimming slightly on the page. "I can't take this," he said, standing up. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," she said evenly. "It's a partnership. You keep full control. I'm just offering a boost." He handed it back to her. "I appreciate it, really, but I don't want things to get complicated." Laurel didn't push. She simply folded the paper again and slipped it back into her pocket. "I get that," she said. "But I don't think you're scared of success, Carter. I think you're scared of trusting someone with it." He didn't have an answer to that. Not one he was ready to give anyway. Later that evening, while they waited in the lounge for the kids to finish a board game, Laurel sat across from him with a mug of tea in her hands. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I wasn't always in corner offices and black cars." He looked up from the sketchpad where he'd been drawing up a shelving unit design. "No, I started out as a receptionist at a logistics firm, worked nights at a diner to cover rent. I didn't know a single soul in the industry, but I learned fast, and I didn't wait for someone to hand me anything." Carter studied her face, the way her eyes seemed to hold the memory like a distant flame. "So what changed?" he asked. I got sick of being ignored, she said. So I built something that couldn't be, he nodded slowly. That's impressive. It was exhausting, Laurel admitted. And lonely. Carter's gaze flicked to the kids, now arguing over a missing game piece. Laurel followed his glance. You've got someone who looks at you like you hung the moon. Yeah, Carter said quietly. He's the reason I get up every morning, she smiled faintly. You're a good dad. He didn't know what to say to that. No one had told him that in years. When they left later that night, the elevator doors closed behind them with a low chime. Carter walked with Parker to the car Laurel had arranged to take them home. He tried not to think about the expensive smell of the leather seats or how the driver knew Parker's name now. Inside the car, Parker leaned against him, half asleep. Is Miss Laurel your friend? He asked, his voice drowsy. Carter blinked. Yeah, I guess she is. She's really nice, Parker murmured. She doesn't talk to me like I'm a little kid. Carter smoothed his son's hair. That's because she thinks you're pretty special. Do you think she likes you? Parker asked, eyes starting to close. Carter hesitated. I think she sees something in me I haven't figured out yet. Parker didn't respond. He was already asleep. The next morning, Carter rolled up the metal gate of his shop and found a delivery truck parked outside. Two men stood beside a stack of sealed crates. You Carter Steele? One of them asked. He nodded warily. Delivery from LD Holdings. Tools, parts, electrical components. Said someone named Laurel Dean arranged it. Carter stared at the stack. I didn't order this. The man handed him a clipboard. She said you'd say that. Carter didn't sign. Not yet. He stepped inside the shop and dialed the number on the card she'd given him days ago. She answered on the second ring. You sent me a truckload of supplies, he said. I did. I told you I didn't want the investment. It's not an investment, she said. It's a push. You can still say no. I just didn't want logistics to be the reason you didn't say yes. He didn't reply right away. I'm not trying to rescue you, she added. I just believe in what you're building. Carter looked out at the crates, then at his workbench, cluttered and worn. And for the first time, he let himself imagine something bigger. I'll pay you back, he said. You don't owe me anything, she replied. Just prove me right. As the truck pulled away and Carter began unboxing the equipment, he didn't notice the quiet smile Parker gave him from the corner. But he felt it, just like he felt something shifting, fast and irrevocable, and he wasn't sure if it was his life changing or his heart. The invitation arrived folded between the pages of a children's book Parker brought home from Laurel's office library, a quiet corner she'd curated on the 12th floor with beanbags, wooden shelves, and hardcover classics with gold-foiled spines. Carter found the envelope after Parker had already fallen asleep, curled up with a dog-eared copy of the Phantom Toll Booth. Inside was a thick cream card with elegant black lettering, L. Dean Holdings Annual Foundation Gala, Friday at 7, formal attire, rooftop ballroom. At the bottom, in Laurel's precise handwriting, bring Parker, he'll be safe, you'll be seen. He stared at it for a long time. The last time he'd worn a suit was his brother's funeral, and even then it had fit like a borrowed body. He didn't have the kind of wardrobe that belonged in rooftop ballrooms. But the words "you'll be seen" stayed with him, echoing louder than he wanted to admit. 3 days later, he stood in front of a vintage mirror at a second-hand tailor's shop while an elderly man pinned the hem of a dark charcoal suit. It was the only one that didn't draw laughter from Parker, who had vetoed each previous option with brutal honesty. You look like a magician, Parker said now, grinning, but a cool one. I'll take it, Carter muttered. The night of the gala, they arrived in a black SUV Laurel had sent, though Carter had protested. The driver simply said, Miss Dean insists, and opened the door. Parker was dropped off with Laurel's sister, Simone, who greeted him at the lobby with a firm handshake and a backpack full of board games. Carter barely had time to wave before the elevator closed and carried him upward, heart thudding with every floor. When the doors opened, he stepped into a different world. The rooftop had been transformed into a glass-walled ballroom with cascading lights suspended like constellations across the ceiling. Waiters in white gloves circled with trays of champagne. The city skyline glittered through the windows, every surface polished to a sheen. People in designer gowns and tuxedos floated past him like they belonged to a different species, Carter adjusted his tie, suddenly aware of how stiff his shirt felt. Then he saw her. Laurel stood near the center of the room, her back to him, speaking to a small group. She wore a sleek black gown with a sharp neckline and a slit that revealed one long leg when she shifted weight. Her hair was swept into a low twist, and a pair of diamond earrings caught the light when she turned. When her eyes met his, something in her face changed. She excused herself from the circle and crossed the room with measured grace, her heels clicking softly against marble. "You came," she said, her voice low. "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted. "This isn't exactly my crowd." She looked him over slowly. "You clean up better than anyone here, trust me," he swallowed. "Thanks for the invite." "I didn't invite you to be polite," she said, her tone sharpening. "I invited you because I wanted you here." That stole the breath from his lungs more than the skyline ever could. As the night unfolded, Laurel introduced him to people Carter had read about in headlines. A venture capitalist in a velvet jacket, a city councilwoman in a sapphire column dress. Every time someone asked how he and Laurel knew each other, she answered the same way. He fixed something no one else could. No one questioned it further. Later, on the outer terrace where the music was quieter and the air cooler, Carter leaned against the railing, watching the city below. Laurel joined him, 2 glasses in hand. She handed him one. "I know this isn't your world," she said. "It's not," he agreed, then added, "but I'm glad I'm here." She looked up at him. "You didn't flinch when that guy from the Housing Commission asked about your business. You answered like you belonged." "I didn't know what else to do," he said with a soft laugh. "You didn't pretend," Laurel said. "That's rare." He took a sip from the glass, then glanced at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you get out of this?" "Out of bringing me here, helping with the shop, sending trucks full of tools." She hesitated only briefly. "When I was clawing my way up, I kept thinking someone would notice. That someone would say, 'You're not invisible. You're worth investing in.' No one did. So now, when I see someone who deserves that chance, I don't wait." Carter looked at her, the firelight from the terrace lanterns flickering in her eyes. "You're not just investing in the shop." Laurel's mouth curved slightly. "No, I'm not." He set down the glass. "That's what scares me." She stepped closer. "Why?" "Because I've got a kid who already looks up to you. Because if this stops being, whatever it's becoming, I can't go back to pretending I don't care." Laurel didn't move away. "I'm not asking you to pretend." Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Then she reached up and touched his jaw, fingers feather light but certain. "I don't know where this is going, Carter, but I'm not afraid of it." He caught her wrist gently. "I want to believe that." "Then believe me," she said. "You don't have to keep fixing everything alone." The words hit him harder than he expected. He hadn't realized how much weight he'd been carrying until that moment, how tightly he'd gripped the idea that needing help meant weakness. But with her, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like something breaking open, like possibility. He leaned in and his lips met hers. It wasn't tentative. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote things: expectations, walls, reasons he'd told himself not to want more. When they finally pulled apart, she didn't say anything. She just smiled like she already knew everything had changed, and Carter didn't look away. Not this time. The air inside the shop carried a faint scent of sawdust and solder, the kind that settled into the walls over time. Carter stood behind the counter, wiping oil from his hands, eyes flicking toward the door again. Laurel hadn't come by in 3 days. He hadn't called. He hadn't wanted to be the one who chased. But the silence itched at him more than he cared to admit. The gala had changed something. That kiss had cracked open a door he couldn't close, and now the quiet on the other side of it wasn't peace, it was pressure. The bell above the door jingled. It wasn't her. It was Simone. She stepped in like she owned the space, heels sharp on the tile floor, her expression unreadable behind a pair of tinted glasses. She pulled them off slowly, looking around. "You've been busy," she said, nodding toward the new shelving unit Carter had mounted along the back wall. "Trying to keep up," he replied carefully. "Is something wrong?" Simone's gaze narrowed. Laurel's been distracted, and when she's distracted, it means one of 2 things. Either a deal's falling apart or a man's involved. Carter crossed his arms. "I didn't realize I was under investigation." "You wouldn't be," Simone said, "if she hadn't started skipping strategy meetings." She didn't mention that. She wouldn't. Simone walked further in, trailing a finger along one of the workbenches. She's been different since she met you. Carter didn't respond. She's not the type to get derailed. You're the only variable. I'm not trying to derail her. Simone turned to face him directly. That's the problem. You might not have to try. His jaw tightened. I care about her. And I'm not looking for a shortcut. Good, Simone said, because there isn't one. She's worked for everything she has. You hurt her, and it won't just be her you answer to. The words didn't come with a threat. They came with conviction. Carter nodded once. Understood. Simone paused at the door. She doesn't let people in, not really. If she let you in, she must see something. Don't make her regret it. After she left, Carter sat down hard on the stool behind the counter and ran a hand through his hair. The shop was quiet again, but the air felt heavier now. That evening, he found Parker asleep on the couch with a blanket half pulled over him and a drawing pad clutched in one hand. Carter gently took it and flipped through the pages. There, in clumsy crayon lines, was a picture of the rooftop ballroom. Stars in the sky, a sea of people, and in the middle, two stick figures holding hands. He traced the outline with a thumb, then looked at his son's sleeping face. The next morning, he locked up the shop and headed to the building where everything had started. He didn't call ahead. He didn't want her to prepare for him. He just needed to see her. The receptionist in the marble-floored lobby gave him a wary look, but she picked up the phone without asking questions. 5 minutes later, a man in a tailored vest appeared and led him to the executive floor. When Carter stepped into Laurel's office, she was standing by the window, her phone pressed to her ear, voice calm but clipped. I understand that it's a risk, Marcus, but if we play it safe every quarter, we'll never grow past the ceiling you've set. Either get behind the numbers or step out of the way. She ended the call and turned. I wasn't expecting you today, she said, her tone neutral. I figured that out when Simone showed up at my shop. Laurel's eyes flickered. She can be direct. She was protecting you. She always does. Carter stepped closer. You've been distant since the gala. Laurel tilted her head. You noticed. I noticed everything. The way you left before dessert, the way you avoided lingering too close. Like you were pulling back before something got too real. She didn't deny it. I've spent a long time building walls, she said finally. They were the only reason I survived in this world. Letting you in wasn't part of the plan. He nodded slowly. I've spent just as long convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That asking for help meant I couldn't handle things on my own. Laurel looked at him. So what now? I don't want to be someone you forget once the novelty fades. You're not, she said. You never were. He took another step. Then let's stop pretending either of us is here by accident. Her breath caught for the briefest moment. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, he said. But I want this anyway. Laurel crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of him. I'm not good at soft landings, she said. I crash or I climb. Then let's climb, he said. She kissed him again, this time without hesitation. When they broke apart, she leaned her forehead against his. There's something I've been working on. A new division under LD Holdings, a restoration branch. Focused on sustainability, repair, and small business integration. He blinked. You're serious. I want you to run it, full ownership, your name on the building. I already spoke with the board. He shook his head, stunned. That's not a promotion, that's a legacy. No, she said. That's a partnership. I believe in what you build, Carter. I want to build it with you. He looked at her. This woman who had once only been a name on a business card and now was offering him not just a future but a place beside her in it. A week later, the sign over the old shop came down. In its place, a new building opened just 3 blocks from the school Parker attended. Tall glass windows, bright interiors, and a team Carter handpicked himself. The name above the door read, Steele and Dean Restoration. On the opening day, Laurel stood beside him, her hand in his, as Parker cut the ribbon with a pair of oversized scissors that he insisted on keeping. People cheered. Photos were taken. And when the crowd thinned and the sun dipped low, Carter pulled Laurel close and whispered, I never thought fixing a broken toy would change my life. She smiled against his shoulder. It didn't. You did. And just like that, the man who had once believed he was stuck in the cracks of a world too polished to hold him found himself standing at the center of it with the woman who had seen him long before everyone else finally did. The heat of late spring pressed gently against the windows of the new Steele and Dean Restoration building as Carter adjusted the collar of his navy blazer and glanced at his reflection in the glass. He wasn't used to wearing anything more formal than a flannel shirt, but today was different. Laurel appeared behind him, her heels soft against the polished floors. She held a small envelope in her hand, her expression unreadable but far softer than the one she wore in boardrooms. "You didn't tell me we were expecting mail," Carter said, turning to face her. She handed it to him without a word. The envelope was embossed with creamy gold lettering and sealed with a wax stamp. He recognized instantly the city's Historical Development Council. He opened it carefully, unfolding the letter inside. "Your proposal was approved," Laurel said before he could finish reading. "The city's officially backing the community restoration project." Carter blinked. "They approved the funding, full grant, materials, labor subsidies, zoning assistance. You're going to bring back the West Bramble District, Carter, one building at a time." He stared at the letter again, then looked up at her. "This was your idea. You made it real." She stepped closer. "I just made a few phone calls." "You made 27 calls," he corrected, raising an eyebrow. "I counted." She touched his lapel, smoothing the fabric. "And I'd make 100 more." Parker ran into the room before Carter could respond, holding a miniature wooden house they'd built together just the week before. "Did they say yes?" he asked, his voice breathless. Carter crouched to his son's level. "They did." Parker beamed and held the model up toward Laurel. "We can fix the yellow building now, right? The one with the vines on the roof?" "We sure can," she said, kneeling beside him. "You'll be our junior architect, starting next week." He nodded solemnly, gripping the model tighter. "I already have ideas." Laurel winked at him. "I'd expect nothing less." Later that evening, Carter found himself on a ladder in the back office, hanging a framed photograph of the old storefront, the original Steele fix-it sign slightly askew above the weathered door. He stepped down carefully, brushing dust from his hands. Laurel leaned against the doorframe. "You really kept that photo? It's where everything started," he said. "I'll never forget it." She walked into the room and rested her palm on the frame. "It's not just where it started. It's where you didn't give up." He turned toward her. "Neither did you." "I almost did," she admitted. "Before you, before Parker. Before I remembered that building something worth having doesn't mean doing it all alone." Carter stepped forward, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how crazy it is," she said, voice low. "That a broken unicorn and a man with grease on his hands ended up changing everything." He kissed her before she could say anything else. Not because he needed to silence her, but because there was nothing left to explain. Her arms circled his waist, and for a moment the world beyond their walls disappeared. When they parted, she rested her head against his chest. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. He opened it carefully, revealing a simple gold band with a hammered texture, delicate and imperfect. "Laurel Dean," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't fall in love with your empire. I fell in love with the woman who trusted me when she had every reason not to. I want to build a life with you, not just businesses, a home, a family, a future." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up and placed her hand over his heart. "I've never let anyone love me like this," she whispered. "But I want all of it. With you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and she laughed through the tears that followed. Parker burst into the room again, eyes wide. "Did you ask her?" he shouted. "I did," Carter said, "and she said yes." He asked, already bouncing with excitement. Laurel crouched and opened her arms. "She said yes." The three of them hugged, tangled in a moment that felt as real and solid as the bricks Carter repaired every day. Months later, the first West Bramble building reopened a community center with a reading room, a garden on the roof, and a workshop for teaching kids basic repair skills. Carter taught the first class. Parker handed him tools. Laurel watched from the back, her hands clasped gently in front of her, a soft smile on her face that she reserved only for moments like this. They didn't throw a massive wedding. Instead, they exchanged vows on the rooftop where it all began, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Laurel wore a simple white dress. Carter wore the navy blazer Parker had once called magician-worthy. They promised each other forever beneath a canopy of soft lights and a sky full of stars. After the ceremony, Carter pulled her close during their first dance, the city glittering behind them. "I used to think I was just someone who fixed broken things," he whispered in her ear. "You still are," she said. "You just fixed me too." And when they kissed, it wasn't about fireworks or fanfare. It was about everything that had come before the broken pieces, the quiet moments, the risks neither of them expected to take. It was about home, and it was theirs. Forever.